Hey everyone, welcome back to the It's a Mind Game podcast. My name is Jade, and today I am introducing you to Erin, who is 30 years old and a proud dog mum to Chloe and Fiona. She lives with her pups and partner in Sacramento and is passionate about women's health and fitness and also well-being. By day, Erin is a registered nurse working at the Level 1 Trauma Centre. She has a master's degree in healthcare leadership and research perceived stress and workplace preparedness in nurses. Thanks so much for being here, Erin. I'm so excited.
I am too. Thanks for having me.
Now, once again, Instagram did its magical things by linking us together through hashtags. What would we ever do without Instagram?
All right.
And I stumbled across your page, which is really cool because you're sharing about being a strong female, essentially. And then I sort of learnt of your HA experience, and it got me interested to learn all about, I guess, what that timeline was like for you, having HA and then moving into sort of a position where you are now, where like strength and nutrition and health is the focus. But obviously, I don't know your HA story just yet. I'm about to learn with everybody. So I guess, how did that begin? What did it look like? And, you know, how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah. So my HA journey, it started about, I'd say the journey started around July of 2019. Just as a backstory before that, I was always very active. I played sports in high school and in college. I have done marathons. I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, but I've always been very into sports and athletics. And, you know, my cycle was never an issue, no matter what I was doing. You know, I didn't pay too much attention to my diet with what I was doing, but it was never an issue. But so July of 2019, I just got off of working a night shift. So as you mentioned, I am a nurse and I'd been working nights for about 4 years. And over that span of time, I just noticed like, oh, I've gained a little bit of weight. You know, obviously my schedule was just all over the place. And so my fitness had kind of taken a step back during that time as well. So I got a new position on day shift and I felt like, oh, this is a really great time for me to really dig into health and fitness again. And kind of coincidentally, around that time, my coworkers in my new department were like, oh, let's do a weight loss challenge. And being the competitive person I am by nature, I was like, oh yeah, this is going down. I'm gonna win. I already am wanting to do this. So it was the motivation I needed to like really get into it. So I hired a fitness coach that my friend had recommended to me, and she put me on a macro plan. She put me on weight training, which I'd already been doing, but just not to the same level of intensity. So I followed this plan and I followed it, you know, to a T. And over, you know, 3-4 months, I lost, you know, maybe like 20 pounds or so. I won my challenge, my unit. So I was like, yay. Yep, totally. You're seeing where this is going. So my coach that I've been working with, she and I had split ways around that time. And I found this other person who lived locally who was recommended to me because I, you know, had been receiving all this feedback like, oh, you look so great. Oh, this, oh, that. And I was like, well, I got to keep this going. You know, I'm doing great.
Yeah.
So I hired this other woman who lived locally, and she had me come in and did my measurements. And, you know, I was feeling so proud of the progress I'd made. And this comment she made to me, she said, oh, well, you know, you're starting around, you know, this body fat, this weight. Now, that's not a bad place to start. And I was like, what? Like, yeah. I mean, she obviously didn't know me or my story. But just that comment, I was like, oh, okay, interesting. I guess I have a long way to go still.
It's so
So
judgmental. And also coming to saying that to someone who likes to impress others, like that's
yeah,
an incredibly damaging comment. Like straight off the bat,
yeah,
you're like, oh, how can I
yeah,
fix this? How can I make her think I'm amazing? Even though this person
right,
means nothing to you,
right,
I can instantly see like the light bulb moment of, oh, all right,
yeah,
challenge accepted once again. Can I
yes.
just quickly backtrack with that first trainer that you had?
Mhm.
How many times a week were you training? Was it double sessions, single sessions? Um, were you on pretty low calories straight off? Oh, so because I know you were using macros, but as a whole,
Yeah,
it ends up being calories anyway. Were they
absolutely.
substantially low? Because different trainers have different education stages. So some are
Yeah,
just jumping you into 1200 with, yes, will make you lose weight, but it'll do a lot of damage too. Other
totally.
trainers or people with nutrition qualifications are a lot more strategic as to, oh, look, you currently consume about 2500. Let's just drop you to 24 first, see how the weight loss
Mhm.
goes, 22. What was that like for you? Because I understand you weren't necessarily counting, you were just sort of eating freely when you went into it.
Right.
But do you remember the sort of drop or what kind of numbers you
Yeah.
had? Or
Yeah, absolutely. As you said before, I was eating very freely, not tracking at all. And so the program she put me on, I was eating probably around 1600 calories. And I was strength training 3 to 4 times a week. I had, I was supposed to do 2 cardio sessions a week and then a certain step goal. So she wanted me doing, 10,000 steps a day, which for what I do for work is very, very easy because I'm on my feet, all day for 12 hours at a time when I'm at work. So I would say for someone like me who is baseline pretty active, 1600 calories was quite low. I know, people obviously go much lower, and in time I did go much lower, but when I started, I was at about 1600 calories and weight training 3 to 4 times a week with a little bit of cardio and steps.
But for someone who is that active for their job, for the most part, you easily would have been burning more than 1600 in a day without the training on top
Oh
of
yeah.
that. And of course, it's easy to say things like that in hindsight because you were just going off someone else's advice. Like that's why you're paying them, like help me get to where I want to go.
Right.
And it's even something I reflected on lately because I started wearing a fitness watch again, because I
Mm,
felt like I was finally in a place where the numbers don't affect me anymore. If I see steps, like it's not dictating my life. It's if I see a
right.
calorie number, I honestly don't care. Like it's just a function of the watch. But
Hmm.
even though I learned so much as I went on, I remember at a time I would have been on, gosh, 1,000 calories, maybe 1,200, and training 2 and 3 hours a day. And I was a personal trainer on my feet for 12 hours.
Mm,
And, never thought anything of it because I was shredded. That's all that mattered.
right.
But then I look at my watch from time to time now, and I might have had a day where not much happened. Like I was just attending to my little one. I might have trained for 45 minutes, but it definitely wasn't eventful. And my calories are
Hmm.
still up at 1,700. And
Hmm.
that's honestly like I was sedentary a lot of the day or just playing with my little one. And
Right.
and it blows my mind how I used to think back then that if I ate any more than 1,200, like I'm going to ruin everything. I'm going to get so fat. And,
Right.
all those things,
Right.
there was
Yep.
no logic to it at
Right.
all. So I just love how you said, the 1,600, because for some, 1,600 could be what they need to fuel. But for someone who's on their feet 12 hours, you can pretty comfortably say
Yeah.
instantly that's not going to be enough.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened from then? You were training 3 strength, two cardio sessions, you step count, around about 1,600 calories. You got some great results, won the challenge,
Mhm.
happy, this is grouse. What happened with the second trainer?
Yeah. So she gave me a workout program as well. We went up to 4 days a week of strength training. Um, and the diet was similar. It was also macros based, and it was around 1,500 calories.
Mhm.
So just a little bit lower than where I'd been. But at that point, I'd been eating, 1,600 calories a day for about 4 months or so. And I had no concept that I just thought like, well, I've lost weight this way, and this is how I need to keep eating in order to make my results stay. So I'm just going to keep going. So I kept eating that way through about December of that year. So it had been about, 6 months or so. And I noticed like, like I haven't had my period, like, but I didn't really think that much of it because I don't know, I just didn't really think that much of it. And I think also I was getting warning signs that things were starting to go awry. But because I'd been working night shift for so many years, I think I was already feeling so much better than I had been, just being on a normal schedule and a normal routine, that I think some of the signs that I was getting, I was just more easily ignored because, well, I feel so much better than I did when I was on nights. Who cares that, I'm sleeping a little bit worse again, and, my anxiety is up a little bit. Like, that's just normal. I wrote off a lot of things that were already giving me a sign that things were maybe not going very well.
Yeah. And I guess the timing of things allowed for that too, though, because at the time when you're enjoying losing weight and getting compliments and things like that, you don't really want to blame it on the diet. You want to blame it on just it's work. Like, it's so much easier to just blame it on work. And, at the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do. Can I ask, when you were working night shift, did you have any changes to your cycle, night shift versus day shift? Because I have learned of a few women who ended up with HA purely from working night shifts, like not nutrition, not exercise, nothing, but just that flip over really knocked them out of whack.
It didn't affect my cycle. Before all of this, I was very, very regular. I had just a normal 29 to 30 day cycle, and for the most part that was never affected. I mean, I think night shift took its toll on other factors of my life, but for whatever reason, it didn't affect my cycle.
So you've been with this trainer, she's dropped your calories, increased your training. What sort of happened from there? Were you still feeling good at this point? Like, you mentioned that your anxiety had gone up, but I guess training wise, were you still performing well? Were you starting to notice, I guess, unease or dis-ease around food or social events? Because those things, they sort of creep in so slowly, and then before you know it, you don't know how to function anymore. Is that what happened for you?
The food thing really, like you said, it crept in. I started at a certain point doing intermittent fasting because I was noticing, I'm so hungry at night. I would rather just eat, wait to eat until noon or so. And then save my calories or my macros, however you want to say it, save it for the nighttime. So at least I'm full when I go to sleep. So that one snuck in. The avoiding food at social events, that one snuck in, and I made rules around, well, the only day that I can eat off of my plan is, Sunday. So if the event's not happening on Sunday, I'm probably not going.
Totally relate.
And then just very, very rigid about, I had to log every single thing. If it wasn't on my Fitness Pal, I wasn't eating it, which everything's on there these days, but it was very, very, very regimented. And I would, pre-log my food for even the next day, just to make sure everything was exactly so. It wasn't all at once, but like you said, over time, these little changes did start to happen.
Yeah, the intermittent fasting one's a really common one too. And I raise my hand as I say that because that was me too. And I remember like thinking certain things like, yeah, but I only get hungry once I start eating. So at least if I delay that first meal as long as I can, It kind of works hand in
me.
hand. I can get my more calories in at night before bed. So I've got a full tummy, I sleep better. But also it means that, what were my other justifications? It's like, oh, but I'm so much more productive if I'm not eating for this long period of time, because I don't need to worry about, it was all pre-made food anyway, getting my lunchbox out. There are all these little things that justify it really just to stay in your totals. The intermittent fasting is so common, especially because the science behind it for male studies is pretty incredible. Like, it works really well for men. It does.
Yes.
But the studies on women are, far from optimal for our hormones. But if you're looking for a reason to eat less, have more before dinner, and then you come across these articles, you're like, oh, this is magic. This is just the perfect thing for me. And then there goes the hormonal whirlwind, whether you had experienced one previously or not. You're probably going to experience it once the intermittent fasting kicks in.
Absolutely. Yeah. You bring up such a good point. Women are so underrepresented in the fitness and nutrition research. And I'd say it's fairly comfortable to say that whatever you've heard that's been backed by a study has been probably done only on men.
It's mind-blowing. Like, once you start to question the things you're reading, you go, oh, okay, well, I'm not a man and I'm not a rat, so
right. And that's what they study.
I'm not sure how this sits with me. Have you ever come across Dr. Stacey Sims and her work before?
I love her.
Because
women are not small men.
Yes, her research is incredible, and I particularly love it because I find because No Period Now What is super common as well, and wonderful text also. But I find that No Period Now What was a lot more get your period back, regain your fertility, prepare for children, motherhood, all that sort of thing. Incredibly helpful, 100%. But Dr. Stacey Sims was more, no, we need to get your period back in a regular cycle so you can be an athlete and perform really well. And because I guess their end game is quite different, I found both texts really refreshing, because some women want to get their period back so they can have children, where some women want to get their period back, one, because, really, if I'm healthy, I am having a cycle, but also they learn of athletic performance, and it's like, oh, look, babies might not motivate me, but performing well absolutely motivates me. So I think she's been a really important part of, I guess, the redirection of thought with women in sport, bodybuilding, just movement for that matter, because she's such an advocate for performance. And if you happen to be lean and perform well, it's more of a side effect. It's not we're trying to be lean to perform well. And I love that. It's like we need to preach that so much more.
Oh, absolutely. I resonate with that so much, because you're talking about those two different end goals. That's exactly me. Like, I once I realized what was happening, my goal wasn't fueled by wanting to have children necessarily, but absolutely, I was like, I want to be able to lift more, and I want to be able to feel great throughout the day. And performance was much more of my motivating factor once I realized that I was running myself into the ground.
Yeah, and it's such an epiphany moment too, to have that insight. So did your period, I guess, stop once you started seeing this second trainer? And how long did you have a missing period for? When did you start to go, oh, I should probably take note of this, I should probably care? Because it's weird. It's if you're into sport, it's actually convenient. Like, that's the first thought. It's like, oh, one less thing on the list. Cool, no worries.
Absolutely.
It's not like, oh my goodness, that's a vital process. Why isn't it happening? How did you perceive those first missing periods? Like, was it a big deal to you, or was it more of a
It was definitely more of a meh, like, not really too concerned. Like you said, in some ways it's kind of nice. And so I lost my period in January of 2020. So I'd worked with this new trainer for just a couple of months. But at that point, like I'd mentioned, I'd been dieting for a good 6 months consistently. Around that January time, I also started playing soccer again. So I think just all that dieting, the exercise, and then adding soccer on top of all of that is what, did the trick as far as my body was just like, nope.
Not doing. Yeah, so you would have had the low calorie for a substantial amount of months. Then
Right.
you've increased your weight training when you changed trainers, and now you've added in an extra, so let's say 2-3 cardio sessions, which is soccer.
Right.
Because I'd
Right.
imagine, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but in that moment you would have just added in soccer as like a fun activity. It wasn't
Right.
necessarily, oh, I need an extra cardio session, let's go play soccer. And those things can
Right.
be really sneaky too, because it's a fun based decision. It's
Yes.
not a let's burn, let's burn, let's burn. So
Yes.
you don't always realize that you might need to fuel more because it's just for
Right.
fun.
Right. Right. But it was interesting with time because by now I was starting to have some of those issues with food, as I'd mentioned. And even if I knew I had soccer in the morning, I would still intermittently fast. So I would not eat before soccer because that was my rule. And it was not long before I realized, I would play soccer in the morning. I wouldn't eat until noon, and I would be on the couch the rest of the day because I felt so just beat, just so tired in a way that I had never experienced before. And
And
I
this
think
was before
that
your first meal when you'd be on the couch, or would you have already eaten by then?
I would usually, go home after soccer and I would make a meal. I mean, honestly, now I would probably think of it as a snack, not a meal, but yeah, I would eat something and then I would be on the couch the rest of the day because I was just so exhausted.
Yeah.
And yeah, so after another month or two of that is when I kind of started thinking like, okay, still haven't had a period. I'm kind of not feeling great, which now that I can look back, I can tell you I was feeling horrible. But, I'm not feeling that great. Like something might be up. But by this point, I don't know, it's kind of interesting. Like it seems like once you develop HA, like there really are changes in your mind and the way you start thinking about things. And you can't see what's clearly laid before you. And so I really continued digging in with my food rules, with my intermittent fasting until about the summertime when I went home to see my parents and my dad said to me like, wow, like you look very small, which I mean, I know it came from a good place, but
But you
it
could
was
sense
kind of
the
the
concern. It wasn't like, oh, you
yeah,
look fabulous, have a look at you. It was, I'm questioning things. I'm seeing you
yeah,
and I'm not sure about this.
right,
How
right.
did
Yeah,
that feel to you in that moment? Because I at that time, were you like happy with how you looked? Were you happy with your training? You like thought
yeah,
you were happy with your diet? So
yeah.
especially someone like your dad to have such a strong reaction, even though it was minimal words, you felt the intensity of
Mm-hmm.
his emotion.
Yeah.
What did that feel like for you?
I mean, at first I was in total denial. I was like, oh, I mean, I feel great. I am eating so well. I'm working out. I am doing great. So that's what I was saying to him and what I was saying to myself. But deep down, I realized like, okay, like I think we might have a problem here and this might have gone too far. And I think this was kind of once the pandemic had hit, this is the first time I'd really been out and seeing other people other than at work, of course, in a while. So it was the first time that I'd seen friends or family to actually say something like that and express their concern. So I think at first it was like a lot of denial and then followed by, okay, it might be onto something.
Yeah. And where did you sort of go from there? Because obviously you sort of had some questions about your own health at the time and
Yeah.
not necessarily alarm bells just yet, but you're starting to go, oh, I'm actually feeling average. I've got this
Yeah.
anxiety that I didn't used to have. There's rigidity around training, like I can't miss it.
Yep.
Got all these rules. I've gone home to see dad. Dad's worried.
Yeah.
Oh crap, I'm worried. So like what happened when you were there, when you went home?
Yeah.
Did you start to research, I guess, HA, or did you know what it was? Because it feels like, mind-blowing moments when you first discover HA is a thing,
Yes.
more than
Yeah.
just, it'll come back. It's like, no, this is
Yeah.
actually an issue.
Yeah, this is actually a thing. So after that, I didn't really dive into the whole HA thing. I think I realized like, okay, maybe I need to loosen up a little bit. So I got rid of the intermittent fasting, and I had like I would eat breakfast. And it was interesting, about a couple weeks after doing that, I did have like a 2-day bleed. Like, I don't think I would consider it a period, but I think just that in and of itself might have helped things enough to get something going.
How long had you skipped your periods for, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. I had no period from January of 2020 till about July. So it's
Okay.
been 6 or 7 missed
Yeah. So
cycles.
it just sounds like your body's really responsive in the way that even though that bleed was only 2 days, a simple
Mm-hmm.
change like adding in breakfast, your body responded quite well to
Mm-hmm.
it, which I would imagine would have been quite encouraging to you as well, to be like, oh, okay, there's something more to this. Like maybe food is some
Yeah.
part of the solution.
Yeah. But I think unfortunately, I still had a lot of rigidity around food, that I wasn't willing to increase my calories. So even though I had a 2-day bleed, I continued with my training, all the same things, and I didn't have another cycle or any other sign of,
Mm.
a bleed for another, 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
So I think it helped maybe temporarily. And then since I wasn't making any other changes, nothing else changed.
No, it's a really good thing to bring to surface though, because that's where the mindset side of things is so important. Because for someone
Yeah.
who's trying to get their period back and is ready to reduce training, increase food, that 2-day bleed could have been like a pat on the back, keep going, eat more, rest more, you can do it. But the bleed
Right.
was almost worth nothing to you because you weren't ready to make the changes you needed to keep it. It was like, oh,
Exactly.
that's nice. I'm glad you're here, but I'm not budging. Like, we'll just
Yes.
stay put. So
Yes.
thank you for bringing that up, because it's that readiness to create change is so important. And
Yes.
sometimes women get their period back easier than others. And the outlook can be like, oh, they barely did any changes. Like, why? Why not
Mm-hmm.
me? And sometimes that's much more difficult because they haven't been forced to get uncomfortable, take a step back from training, eat in a way that makes them fearful, anxious, all those things. So
Yeah.
they actually kind of get stuck in limbo because it's like, well, I've got my period now, I don't need to change. But they're
Mm-hmm.
still like a caged bear. It's like, yeah, but I still can't eat properly. I still can't not train.
Right.
Um, so like I honestly believe a big part of the HA process is literally just life lessons of learning to surrender
Oh,
and trust your body.
absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so thanks so much, because you're actually the first to sort of bring that up, that sometimes you can have a super short bleed, but it's just not worth anything unless you're ready for it.
Right. And I really wasn't. And like I said, I was never so motivated to get a period because I was trying to get pregnant or anything like that. So it was much more of like, this is probably important. I know this is a sign of health and it's missing, and all these other things are going on. So that made it a little bit easier for me just to not, or to dismiss it, to be not caring so much. Whereas I would imagine someone who wants to get pregnant would have maybe a very different reaction to
Yeah,
that.
and the timelines are so different too, because sometimes it's
Right.
that timeline of, no, but I really need to fall pregnant now, so I need to make things happen. But
Right.
if that's not your driving factor and you haven't quite come across literature yet about the performance side of things,
Yes.
it's like, oh, I can wait another month. I can wait
Yeah.
another month. This isn't so bad. It's not going to kill me. So,
Right.
because if you think about any other system in your body shutting down, it's alarm bells. Like, you are going to a doctor, you're going
Absolutely.
to emergency. But our
Right.
cycle, it gets dismissed a fair bit. So it makes it really easy for us to dismiss it when it
Absolutely.
disappears. because no one's really preaching it's important, like until now, which is where at the moment it's a really exciting time for female athletes in particular, because we've finally got a generation of this matters, like to be your best self, your periods included.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so true.
Yeah. So where did you go from there? So you kept dieting, you kept training as is. Well, I guess was your sort of breaking point, awakening that went, all right, enough's enough. I need some changes.
Yeah.
I've got to get this period back.
Yeah, I think my wake up call, it was something that is fairly insignificant, but it really was like that moment that shifted things. I was on vacation and I was just sitting on the couch and I was on my phone and I was looking at my app that I had used to track my periods. And I was looking at it and like, wow, this is really weird. Like there's been nothing and it's been a year. And, it tells you at the bottom, your cycle is considered, irregular. And I was just reading this and I was like, wow. And like I said, it seems so small, but for me, seeing that in front of my eyes, like the data, I was like, okay, I need to address this and fix this because this is not good.
Well, I'd imagine especially to see the timeline lapse too, because if you're just going month by month of, it didn't show up, it only feels like 1 month that it didn't show up, even though they're collective in a row.
Right.
You're not like stringing them all together. But then this app has made you actually go, oh, there's 12 of them missing. And you're like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right. That's probably a little too far. And on vacation too, it's really interesting that of all times, that's when you chose to look at that app, when you're really relaxed, you're not working, and you've gone, oh, like this is important. Let's have a look.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I mean, I can be a little woo-woo on some things, but I feel like it was like a little bit of a divine intervention, because I think if I looked at it at another time when I was busy or at work, it'd be much easier to dismiss. But I was just sitting there and I was like,
you had the time to read and process. And
yeah. And so that's when I started going deep into the research. I was Googling things. I was on PubMed. I was looking up anything and everything that I could. And I mean, at that time I was ready to realize, it's my choices in diet and exercise that has led me here. And so, that was when I was ready to address what needed to happen.
How did you feel when essentially condensing it right down that the solution was eat more, train less? Did you feel like a lot of resistance? Were you sort of, it makes sense? How did you feel learning of that?
It was a lot of things. It was definitely like, this makes sense. The physiology of why this happens makes sense. And the way you get out of it makes sense. Like, okay. But absolutely, there was a lot of resistance. There was the feelings like, well, if that won't work for me, I can sidestep this whole process. I can get away with not quite doing it and I'll probably be fine, kind of thinking that I was the exception to
I have a joke with another girl, and it's like when everyone says it, because we all think that we can have the unicorn recovery.
Yeah.
Which is like, I'll maybe stop one session by 50% and that'll be enough.
Yeah.
Like I'll be different.
I feel
yes. And I feel sad that everyone's going to give up everything and I won't need to. And you really believe it. And I just, most people that come on say the same thing. Like, I read it and I was like, makes sense, but I'll be different. Like, I'll prove them. Yeah. So what were your first changes? Like, what did you decide was reasonable at the start, and how did that sort of progress along time?
Yeah. So my recovery was, it was not the zero exercise, 2,500 calories. It was not just like okay, this is happening and this is what I'm going to do now. It was a bit more gradual. So the first thing I did was I deleted my Fitness Pal. I'm like, I need to let this app go, because I know that if I continue trying to log things, I'm just going to continue eating the exact same things that I already was. So I needed to let that go. And I started allowing myself to eat freely. I, bought all of the foods that I wouldn't allow myself to eat before, like peanut butter pretzels. Oh, yeah, that went down. Dried fruit. I mean, I stopped eating fruit. I stopped eating fruit because that didn't fit into my macros for my carbs.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just,
No, because
I,
I'm just smiling because it's like it's one of the first things that goes, and it makes
yeah,
so much sense in the moment that you make the decision. But then in hindsight, when you look back at it, it's fruit. Like it's
right,
literally from the ground. It's got vitamins in
right,
it. It's
right,
so perfectly made for our systems. And yet
right,
we read
yeah,
that and went, oh, no, no, no. Like my
yeah,
Fitbit says no.
no,
And I can't weigh it. Where a protein bar, I can scan it. So that must be better. And that's
absolutely.
where it manipulates our psyche so easily.
Mm-hmm.
And in that respect, it's purely out of effort. It's like it's easier to scan the protein bar than what it is to try and weigh your apple. And that's when
Absolutely.
my fitness pal, it's dangerous in so many ways. And sometimes that's just one of it. It makes you turn against some of the most natural, healthy foods there is
Yeah.
because it doesn't fit with the program.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I was eating a Quest bar a day and I would never touch a piece of fruit, which, yeah, like I said, hindsight, you look back, you're like, oh my goodness, like, how could you make that choice in the name of health? But
I love that you said
it's,
Quest bar too, because that was me as well. Like a Quest bar a day staple.
yep. Yep. Yeah. It was, oh, yeah. How
How did
much
you
you
feel when
learn,
you
right?
started? Oh my goodness. And the thing is, even when you reflect on it, you still
Yeah.
learn new things about yourself and go, oh yeah, you used to think that. Like you used to
Yeah.
do that. And it's
Yeah.
quite a journey on both sides of it. Did
Yeah.
you instantly start to feel a little bit better when you started eating more? Did you recognize some like gut discomfort? Things like when you go into the bathroom, had your hair changed, like those
Yeah.
initial steps, what did they feel like? What did you notice?
Yeah, I think initially I did start feeling a lot better as far as my energy. And, my gut during my HA was worse than it ever been in my whole life. I never really had issues with anything with my gut. I didn't have, constipation or anything really. But during HA, my gut was a mess. And once I started eating more, it did improve, but I definitely was not comfortable feeling full. That was a feeling that I hadn't had for a year at least. And it felt kind of scary almost like, I don't know if I should be feeling this. Am I
Mm.
eating too much? I don't know. So I had to do a lot of work. And at this point, I did start working with a therapist, just because I recognize like I've created a lot of, fear and disordered ways of viewing food. And I can't get out of this myself at this point. So
Mm.
definitely working with her to, address the fear, like the real fear that I was feeling around eating more.
And that's such an important thing too, because everyone's recovery is different on the mind and thought process side of things. Like,
Mhm.
um, so I went through my HA recovery without the help of a therapist. I did see one, and her
Mhm.
motto was sort of just eat and you'll be fine. So clearly that
Mm.
didn't stick because it's like, well,
Mm-mm.
if I could do that,
It's
I
not that
would. Like
simple.
I really would. um,
Yeah.
but then, in the everything happens for a reason side, it forced me to do all of this mindset work, which has led me to
Yeah.
my path where I am now.
Right.
But there absolutely can get to a point in your recovery where you go, I've done as much as I can mentally. I'm really stuck now. I don't know how to move forward. And like, that's a wonderful spot to ask for help. And
Yeah.
sometimes your friends and family can't get you there. And sometimes, no matter how much you try to get past those barriers, you just
Yeah.
need someone to just help you through. Um,
Absolutely.
and recognizing that is such a superpower too, because you've recognized what you need. And
Right.
if you need it, you absolutely should go and get it. Like there's nothing to
Yeah.
lose from that. Like that's the perfect scenario. And just the heaviness of the stomach. because that's so common amongst
Mhm.
pretty much all of us. And because we get so used to feeling hollow and empty,
Yes.
like there's nothing. And even when you go through the weight gain process, it's like, I'm not used to feeling my arms. I'm not used to feeling my stomach.
Mhm.
And then it's almost like you're hypersensitive to it. So
Mhm.
even though you're talking to someone, it used to be food thoughts all the time, right? They
Mhm.
go away because you're not hungry anymore. But now you're talking to someone and it's like, but I can feel my stomach. I can feel my stomach. I can feel my
Mhm.
stomach and my thighs touching. I can feel them touching. And you sort of
Yeah.
replace one commentary for the next. And
Mhm.
that takes effort to get rid of. It takes effort to
It does.
learn this is normal. This is okay. Like you can think about
Mhm.
something else now. You're safe. You're healthy.
Yeah.
No one's noticing. Yes, I'm meant to have a heavy stomach when I eat. Yes,
Mhm.
bloating is actually a natural thing. Your stomach's going to fill up if there's food in there. And
Right.
I remember simple things like that being like, oh my gosh, there's a bump in my stomach. Like, what's
Mhm.
wrong? And it's like, oh, honey, like you just ate a meal, of course.
Yeah,
And it
exactly.
sounds so simple, but I freaked out. What do you mean there's
Yeah.
a bump in my stomach? Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Like my
that,
clothes are tighter at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day. This is so crazy.
yes. And so many people with different experiences would go, what do you mean? Like, of course your jeans are tighter at the end of the day. But for
Yeah.
someone who's been hungry for so long,
Yep.
it really is a whole new experience. You
Yeah.
literally need to learn about yourself all over again.
Yeah. And it's crazy how, at least in my experience, I only went through this for about, a year, a little over a year. But before that, I'd never gone through anything like that before. But just in that period of time, like I said earlier, your brain, there's changes that happen where
Mhm.
you don't remember how it felt to feel normal, no matter how long you were normal before, I feel like.
Yeah, it's like you don't know your life outside of that now, which is where I guess that feeling of shackles comes in. Because
Mhm.
it's like, this is how I live. So how do I live any other way? And it's
Right.
already scary because of decisions that you need to make that you previously never used to.
Mhm.
But it does feel like you need to learn a new way of life,
Mhm.
including thoughts, body changes. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, it really is just such a big process.
It
Um,
is.
but such a worthy one too. Um,
Right.
did you find the therapist was quite helpful with just learning to navigate thoughts, how to perceive things in, I guess, a non-emotional way? Because that's the thing, we notice things and we just panic and freak out. And it's just
Yeah.
learning to, just pause for a minute. Let's talk it out. Let's have a think about it. What's
Yeah.
logically happening versus
Right.
what's making you panic?
Right. Yeah, the therapist was very helpful. I think just having a space to speak about my experience and just talk about how I was feeling, that in and of itself was so, so powerful because I didn't know who to talk to about it. I thought I am, I'm doing all these right things. I'm doing everything that every trainer would probably think was, the best client of all time. And I'm doing everything right, but I feel so horrible.
Mm.
So it felt so amazing just to have someone to hear me as I'm saying, like, well, I'm doing all of these things and I don't know if it's right. I don't think it's right. I don't feel great. And just having that space, just to say what was happening was so helpful. And at the same time that I was seeing this therapist, I was also doing a lot of my own research and investigation on mindset work. And I was listening to a lot of work from life coaches and really diving into, like you were saying, your thoughts. Your thoughts are what drive your actions and what you're doing with your life. So really diving into the thoughts that had led me to developing HA and the thoughts that I had been having about food and about my body and what it meant to be successful in fitness, and really, really challenging all of those thoughts that had led me to where I'd gotten. I think were just so helpful. Like you said, it's such a big unlearning and relearning of so many things when you're going through this process.
Yeah, and the motivations to train as much as we train and diet as much as we diet is so much more than the training and the diet. Like the
Yeah.
emotional baggage that you've got, past
Yeah.
memories that you've got, traumas even. Um, and that's where I guess the confronting side of HA recovery is, because it's not just a simple eat more, train less,
No.
because there's plenty of reasons why you need to train as much as you train and why you need to diet as much as you diet. And for so
Absolutely.
much of it is, it's normally the people around us that we perceive as needing us to do it.
Mhm.
And it's a weird thing because we tend to believe that, no, I just really love to train. I just really love to diet. And then you dig a little deeper and you start to witness like, oh no, I actually really appreciate the praise of people. And I really
Yeah.
like it when people come to me for advice because I like to help people.
Yeah.
And I like that I encourage people to order a healthy option instead of going to Macca's. And my habits help people.
Mm-hmm.
And I just
Yeah.
want to help. So suddenly your training and diet's not even to do with weight loss or your body. It's
Yeah. It's
actually
how
you
you're
want to
being
help
perceived.
people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay, well, we can help people in other ways. How do we do that?
Right.
So no, I'm obviously an advocate for the mindset work, but like life coaching mindset, you digging into the emotions and the thoughts and the memories, because if you
Mm-hmm.
can decode those, it's like unlocking Pandora's box and actually finding the
Totally.
answer. Like the answer's there,
Totally.
you've got it.
Yep. The
And we
answer
feel
is
like
in
we're
you.
so lost and everything else is a whirlwind. And no, like you've got every single key to every single lock. You just
Yep.
need to be willing to search for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you brought up such a good point as far as how much other people's perception really drives this phenomenon. I mean, one of my big barriers to really changing was thinking like, well, everyone thinks of me as being this super fit, super, super healthy, just the best eater. And if I start eating more or start eating these bad for you foods, like who am I anymore? And you just develop this whole persona over something that, you
And
know,
then you also start to link that if they think I make all the best decisions, as soon as I decide to eat a slice of cake or a bite of cake, they're going to notice straight away. And honestly, a
yeah,
lot of the time they do, because it's like, oh, wow, you're having cake. And the thing
yeah,
is, that reaction's actually got nothing to do with you eating the cake. It's the fact that most people want a reason for them to be able to eat it. So if you're the
yes,
super fit, healthy chick who's eating
yeah,
cake, it's like, yes, she's eating it. Clearly that's
yeah.
okay
So I'm
now.
okay eating it too.
Yes. But instead
Yes,
we get that reaction, go, oh my God, they know I'm eating cake. They're going to think this, they're going to think that, and I'm going to, and
yeah,
we scramble. We just go
yeah,
into this massive crazy whirlwind of thoughts. And you know what? The comment had nothing to do with us and it had everything to
totally.
do with them.
Yep, it's so true. I think I forget where I heard this, but everyone is thinking about themselves just as much as we're thinking about ourselves. So
Yeah.
really, it's very little of what people are saying to you or about you is actually about you.
Early on in my like journey, I guess, I was fresh out of competitions and I think I might have upped my food intake a little bit and I gained maybe a kilo, but in my mind, I felt like it was 10. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
saying to, he's my husband now, but he was my boyfriend back then. I can't remember what I said. And this was before he knew that I had eating disorders and stuff too. And he
Mm-hmm.
said, oh, don't even worry about it. Everyone's way too busy worrying about themselves to care about you. And it was really weird because I'd never wanted attention for my physique. But
Yeah.
when he said that, I was like, oh,
Yeah. What?
no one cares. Oh, like it's probably true. No one actually does care.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, it was definitely nothing that led to me eating more or resting at all. But I do remember in that moment thinking like, yeah, when everyone's at the gym, they're all looking at themselves in the mirror.
Oh yeah.
They're all
Oh yeah.
hiding from other people so that they don't feel vulnerable. Like,
Yep.
not a big part of going to a public gym is other people judging you. It's more them
Oh,
coping with their hour of activity.
absolutely. Yeah. So
Um,
true.
and yeah, so there's so many parts of your story that like we match. I love it.
Yeah.
Um, when what were you doing when you finally did get your period back? So you've started doing the inner work, you're working your mindset, you're seeing a therapist, you're researching like mad, you're making the connections of the changes required to get your period back. What was life like when you did get it back? And I guess, what did you find the biggest obstacle?
So in order to get it back, I mean, it didn't take me that long. I was eating more. I wasn't tracking it, so I can't say exactly how much I was eating, but it was substantially more than I had been. And I was eating, enough that I wasn't really, I wasn't hungry. I was eating, I would just say I was eating a lot more. I was still exercising. I did continue weight training, but I was only training about 3 times a week. And I was training much less intensely. So I was not going for PRs. I was not going for my 1 rep max. I had dialed down the intensity quite a bit. And I was not militant anymore about getting my steps. So if it was a day off of work, I would be totally fine taking the dogs for a walk and having that be it. I wasn't going out and making sure that I'm walking 10,000 steps no matter what. So I'd really reduce a lot of the mental pressure on myself to, hit certain weights, hit certain steps. So there was a lot more rest happening, but I was still working out. And I think after about 2 months of that is when I got my first period back.
That's great. That's so good. Because everyone's stories are unique in regards to how long it takes them to get back, and the modalities of training that they're doing is really different as well. Right. And it's nice to shine light on all sides of the fence purely to highlight that your recovery is your recovery. Like you can't copycat someone else's. You can't make it happen other than doing the processes that you need to eat more, train less, essentially.
Right. And I mean, my life is also probably, I would say a stressful job, but my life is not stressful. Whereas, some other women have children and families and multiple jobs and just a much more stressful life. Whereas for me, I don't have kids. I can come home and relax. And other than work, I don't have a lot of other life stressors. So I think that's important to mention too. If you're someone who has a crazy stressful life and tons going on, and you want to try and continue training and maybe not eating as much as you could, maybe that wouldn't work as well. But I just thought that was worth mentioning. My stress load is probably lower than others.
And at the end of the day, we know it is a stress response. So the fact that you could sort of switch off once you left work left more space for you to find sort of like a nice relaxed steady state versus rushing from one environment to the next. It's just as stressful. And because stress is just the biggest contributor, and some women get HA even though they haven't trained. It's just purely emotional stress. So exploring all areas 100%, it's crucial, and not just for getting your period back, but just for leading a happy, healthy life. Like who wants to be stressed 24/7? And yes, certain circumstances are going to make you stress. Like we can't delete it.
Of course.
But management, you're right, is so important. Like just find ways to manage it. I feel like I was going to say something, but I think I heard your dog and I'm like, oh my gosh, the puppy.
Oh, did she come in? Did you see her?
No, I didn't see her. I just thought I heard her, and I love dogs, so I get distracted pretty
you're walking
quickly.
Around.
And then, so you were still training, weightlifting. Have you increased your training since then? Did you get your first 3 periods in a row? Was there a few hiccups along the way? I guess, just because the first 4 periods can be a bit funny.
So I have had consecutive cycles since that time. However, my first one was maybe 40-ish days, a little over 40 days. And they've gotten shorter over time. So the first one, like I said, it was long, and then it was a little bit less long, and then a little bit less long. So it's shortened over time.
Yeah. And have you started increasing your training, or are you still doing the 3 days a week?
Yeah, I've played around with it. I think once I started eating more and once I got a cycle, I felt physically a lot better than I had. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to start upping things. But then I noticed like, all right, I'm starting to feel a little bit more tired again. I don't know. So I that has shifted over time, and I've learned so much as far as exercising as in terms of where you are in your cycle as well. And so it's evolved. I kind of started probably adding it back a little bit too quickly, but very, very quickly realized like, all right, I need to go back to what I've been doing. This is not the season of my life to be going crazy on this. I want to, get like actually healthy, not the healthy that I thought I was chasing before, but get actually healthy. And in order to do that, I really need to be listening to myself and not just going hard all of the time like I had been before.
Yeah. And what a great skill that you've picked up, where you can actually go, oh, I'm feeling more tired. Why?
Mhm.
Should I proceed with what I'm doing? Should I take a step back?
Yeah.
Because that's one of the most important lessons we can learn throughout the journey. And once you've learned that, you've got it in your pocket.
Right.
And sometimes I think that no one wants to do HA again. So it's like
Yeah.
you take that tool with you and go, all right, now I'm going to listen this time. And I could get it wrong. Like I could train too much and I'm
Yeah.
wiped out for 2 days. And
Yeah.
that's where it is a bit of a dance at the start. And it's okay
Yeah.
to make mistakes. Like, we're not perfect. And some part of us is just so excited to get back into it that it's not with a negative
Absolutely.
intention. It's just, I'm excited to be training. Like, let me at it.
Yeah.
But no,
Yeah.
I
And that
love the
was me. I
process.
was like, all right, let's go. I'm feeling good.
Yes. And it's so common, but I love that you've got that. Like, no, I can actually pay attention to the signals I'm getting. Am I more tired? Am I too sore? Am I like, is my anxiety creeping in? Like, because there's so many different elements to pick from.
Absolutely.
And then with the training to suit your cycle, are you doing that based off like cycle syncing protocols? I guess to what degree you're doing that, because it's a new world I'm
Yeah.
diving into and I love it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm far from an expert, and I pretty much do all of my own training programming, and it's very informal. I mean, I know that when I'm in my ovulation phase of my cycle, I generally feel like really great. I feel really energized, and I do, push myself a little bit harder when I'm doing my training. And then, in the second half of my cycle, I I kind of coincidentally found out about this many, like maybe years prior, but I noticed that my numbers that I would be lifting would be much lower despite trying equally as hard. And I was so baffled by it. I was like, last week I lifted this, and this week I can only lift, maybe 3/4 of that. What's going on? So I'm just aware of it now. And it's like, okay, it's, the second half of my cycle, the luteal phase, I'm gonna like probably do a little bit less intensity, a little bit less volume. I love programming my deloads, so just a much lower amount of training in that week. And then, for the menstrual phase, I usually for the first couple of days either won't train at all, or we'll do just some like very chill yoga, something very relaxing. And then after the first few days of my cycle, I usually feel pretty good again, and I'll start kind of slowly tapering it back up.
Yeah. What you said about the numbers on like performance based, around ovulation, that's the best time to get some great numbers. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden 2 weeks later, you're like, oh my gosh, this feels like the same level of exertion.
Yeah.
And it's not as heavy as what it was. And when
Right.
you don't have the information, all you jump to is, oh my gosh, I'm so crap. Like,
Yeah.
You know,
What's going on?
the
What's wrong
negative
with me
self-talk, what's
today?
wrong with you? Your head's in
Yeah.
the game, but apparently it's not, because look at these numbers. But if you have
Right.
that knowledge of, no, this actually got nothing to do with your performance and everything to do with your hormones,
Yep.
it's like you kind of brace yourself for the workout. It's like, all right, we know it's not going to be a PB day, and that's
Totally.
okay. I'm just going to do the best I can with what I've got.
Right.
And
Right.
the mindset around training, when you have that knowledge, is
Mhm.
such a nicer place to be as well.
It
Because if you're not
is.
hit, and you know, sometimes you'll have the capacity to hit a PB in that phase, like you're not broken in that phase. But
No,
it's just
absolutely
knowing
not.
that if you're trying really hard and that effort's not matching last week's effort, like, yeah, it's okay. It's like a completely normal biological response, and you're
Yeah.
not broken or damaged or unmotivated. Um,
Right.
it's just the phase you're in. So thank you for bringing that up, because it's,
Yeah.
again, it's just really important information. And I
Right.
hope some women go
And
out and
just,
research the cycle syncing
yeah.
protocols and its effect on training, because it just helps shift your mind around, I guess, expectations.
Yeah.
It's like, what
Yeah. It's
what
like
can I
I'm gonna
expect
go
from
in.
myself today?
Absolutely. And it's just something that, I'm so glad is being spoken about now, because when I grew up, I mean, I was involved in athletics from being a very young child, and never was this ever talked about. And again, we a little bit talked about earlier, the research isn't done on this. It's only very, very recently that we've come out with information talking about how the changes in the menstrual cycle affect performance.
Mhm.
Almost all of the studies that we've been basing fitness protocols on for men and women were only based off of research on men. And it's
Yeah. Well,
just not the same.
you might have heard the same thing given your athletics background. If you're doing athletics throughout that stage of puberty and you didn't get your period when all your friends did, it was just, yeah, like that's common in athletics. So I was a
Oh, yeah,
gymnast,
yeah.
and it was very much, I was 14 and didn't have my period yet. And no one, like, it was okay. Like, you're a gymnast, of
Yeah,
course you won't. I
yeah.
turned 15, turned 16, still nothing. And then I stopped because I had fractures in my back, and I got my period within 6 months. And I never thought anything of it until the HA
Mm-hmm.
journey kicked in. I'm like, no, that's no
Yeah,
coincidence you got your period after
yeah,
you stopped gymnastics. It wasn't your time. It was
yeah.
actually finally, but it's like, my God, she's resting. But
Yeah,
even as a kid, you're not going to question it. You're just doing your sport.
of course.
Your
Of
parents are
course.
listening to what your coaches are telling you, which is totally common. Don't worry about it.
Yep.
Um, your coaches probably didn't know any better either. It was just like,
No.
we know that in this group of girls, this happens.
Yep.
It's not abnormal, don't worry.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd love to see where sport goes moving forward with the education coaches have got now, with even just younger
Absolutely.
athletes. Like, no, we need to make sure they got their period by at least 13, 14,
Mhm.
because where this matters.
Yeah,
Um,
it
yeah,
does.
so it is exciting things happening, and it's great that someone like yourself is willing to come out and just talk about it and share your experiences. And it looks like you're really enjoying your training now, from what I've seen on your Instagram. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, it feels very empowering. I like you said, you don't want to go through HA twice, but to be honest, I wouldn't not go through it again. I wouldn't change anything that I've gone through because of how much I've learned. I mean, I don't think I would have ever gone to therapy in my life had this not happened, and I've gained so much from that. I don't think I would have learned all of these things that I have about not just the performance and sport and fitness and nutrition, but so much about myself. And like you said, that mindset piece and addressing your limiting beliefs and your thoughts and all of these things that contribute to developing HA in the first place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's an incredible message for us to finish on. And it's funny, you start off HA thinking like, why me? And then by the end of it, it's like, oh, thank you. Like, it happened for me. It never happened
Yeah.
to me. It happened for me.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's going through HA right now, listening, thinking
Yeah.
everything sucks and it's not fair and I don't want to,
Mhm.
like, yes, we've definitely felt it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
just the light at the end of the tunnel is really there, and it's
It
incredible,
is.
and you just won't regret a day of recovery.
It's so true. It's so true. I heard this from I don't know if you're familiar with Ashley. but she said, when you're going through HA, you're so afraid to jump off that cliff because you just don't know what's going to be at the bottom. But once you do it, you realize at the bottom, there's just a bunch of us cool ladies hanging out, having a pool party. And it's really just the best.
You
and
know,
I'm like,
I
that's
haven't
so
heard
true.
that. That's fantastic.
It
It's
is
so
true.
true.
It's so scary.
Yeah, it
But
is. And it's that lack of like what's going to happen.
yeah.
And you find so much like wealth in multiple facets of life, friendship, self-discovery. Yeah. That's
cool
really cool.
part of
Who's
your life.
Ashley? Who's Ashley?
She works with Danny in the HA Society.
Oh, okay. I think I would have seen her again on Instagram. I haven't actually had her on the podcast though. I might need to reach out.
Oh yeah, she's awesome. I love her. And like I said, that little thing she said that one time, I was like, that is so good. Oh my gosh.
That's awesome. I think it's funny because I've got the visual in my head as well of like me being on the edge of a cliff being like, no, I don't want to do it. And then that's what it feels like now, is that I'm at the bottom and I've got really cool people just like you that I'm talking to right now, being like, yeah, that's what we used to do. This is what we're doing now. It's a fun way to live.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, if anyone wants to reach out and have a chat with you about your journey or your training or, anything, they've jumped off the cliff of HA fear, they're ready to party. Where can they find you?
So the best place to find me is going to be on Instagram. I'm at Strength Moves Her. There's a dot in between. So strength.moves.her. I try and stay pretty active on there. You can shoot me a message and I'm more than happy to speak with anyone about really anything, and just happy to be here to help all those who are going through it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I will put your Instagram handle in the show notes for anyone who wants to go back and double check. But yeah, thank you again for sharing your journey, for being so open and honest about everything. And, even just like the insight of life after HA and, all these things that you've found and just taken into your everyday life that, bring you joy and make you happy. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.